good morning, and thank you for being here. When I first met with you all 2.5 years ago, I told you that I was here not to be right, but to get it right. And since that time, it's been my absolute privilege to work alongside all of you to do right. Together, we have taken hundreds of guns out of our communities. We have taken thousands of pounds of meth and fentanyl off the streets. We have led the nation consistently in Project Safe Childhood prosecutions, and every day we work tirelessly to protect women, children, and families in Indian country from violent crime. Together, we have done right by each other, by our communities, and by the rule of law. And now it's my distinct honor to introduce a man who's been doing right by the law, upholding the law for his entire career, first as a prosecutor, then as a judge, and now as the Attorney General of the United States of America. A man whose commitment to community safety is unwavering and whose leadership of the department sets an example for us all about putting our heads down, doing the work without fear or favor. Attorney General Merrick Garland.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks for that overly generous introduction. Appreciate it. I'm grateful to be here in South Dakota and have a chance to thank in person our federal, state, local, and tribal partners who are gathered around this table. This group of leaders represent the people who every day put their lives on the line to protect the people of South Dakota. This also represents the kind of collaborative approach that is at the heart of the Justice Department's effort to fight violent crime. When I became Attorney General 3.5 years ago, I knew the most powerful tool we would have to fight violent crime were these kinds of partnerships. That was my personal experience when I was a young prosecutor, prosecuting violent crime and drug trafficking in the early 1990s. That was my experience later in the 1990s when I was a manager in the Justice Department, organizing and supervising our national effort to prosecute violent crime and to deter violent crime. So we built our own anti-violent crime strategy around these kinds of partnerships with not only with the state, local, tribal, and federal agencies, but also with the communities that we all serve. And then we fortified these partnerships by bringing to bear the latest technologies we now have for identifying and prosecuting the criminals who are driving the most amount of violent crime in our communities. And now we have seen results. Last year, we saw one of the lowest violent crime rates in the country in 50 years. That included the largest drop in homicides nationally in 50 years. But we know that progress in some communities has not been the same. Progress across the country is still uneven. And of course, there is no level of violent crime that's acceptable. The Justice Department is working here in South Dakota and across the country to arrest violent felons, disrupt violent drug trafficking, and prosecute the individuals and organizations most responsible. That is what this U.S. Attorney's Office did in May through the Justice Department's Project Safe Neighborhoods program. Working as part of that program, this office brought together partners from ATF, the City of Sioux Falls Police Department, and Homeland Security Investigations to secure a 7-year prison sentence for a man who threatened and shot at his neighbor and his neighbor's 6-year-old child. Law enforcement later recovered a bullet that had gone through 3 walls in the victim's home. And over the course of the investigation, law enforcement found that the defendant was in possession of a handgun with an obliterated serial number. I want to just speak for a moment about the successful sex trafficking sting that this office announced earlier this week, a joint sex trafficking operation involving federal, state, and local law enforcement designed as a sting during the Sturgis motorcycle rally to apprehend persons attempting to arrange sexual encounters with underage children. 7 men were arrested and charged. This is this office and this group's effort to protect the most vulnerable among us. In April, working 10 different federal, state, and tribal law enforcement agencies, this office secured sentences for 3 individuals responsible for carjacking and kidnapping an FBI employee at gunpoint. At the time, the FBI employee, a victim specialist, had recently left an unrelated crime scene and was heading back to his duty station. The defendants carjacked and kidnapped him, held him at gunpoint for more than half an hour. They wanted the stolen vehicle because they were attempting to traffic meth, fentanyl, and heroin from Colorado to South Dakota, and they were trying to evade the highway patrol. The 3 defendants were arrested, they were prosecuted, and each sentenced to more than 26 years in prison. In addition to working to confront violent crime and gun violence, this office has worked tirelessly to stop the flow of fentanyl into our communities. We know that a single dose of fentanyl can be deadly, and that is why we will never stop working to end this epidemic. Last week, this office secured a guilty verdict for a man who helped traffic thousands of pills from Minneapolis to the northeast part of South Dakota. The sentencing date has been set for October. In June, the office announced that it had secured sentences for 6 members of a drug trafficking organization that transported large quantities of methamphetamine and fentanyl into the Sioux Falls area. The defendants all received sentences between 10 and 33 years. Also in June, the office worked with the FBI and the Flandreau-Sante Tribal Police to investigate and prosecute a man who distributed fentanyl to a victim who died from an overdose. The defendant was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Our partnerships with tribes have also been key to addressing the long-standing crisis of missing or murdered Indigenous persons. In June 2023, the department announced the creation of a new MMIP regional outreach program to prevent and respond to these terrible tragedies. The program has placed a regional coordinator here in South Dakota. In June of this year, through the program, this office identified and successfully prosecuted the man responsible for killing a victim in the Lake Traverse Indian Reservation, whose case had gone unsolved for 30 years. That defendant was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Tribal communities deserve safety and justice. Since 2021, the Justice Department has provided $19.1 million to support a number of tribal justice initiatives in South Dakota. I look forward to traveling to Indian Country later today to the Yankton Sioux Reservation, where I will meet with leaders from each of the 9 tribal nations. This office and the entire Justice Department are committed to continuing to work closely with our partners in tribal law enforcement. The cases I've just shared with you are just a snapshot of the work that this U.S. Attorney's Office does every day to fulfill the Justice Department's priorities, to keep our country safe, to protect civil rights, and to uphold the rule of law. I am very proud of U.S. Attorney Ramsdell and of all the men and women of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of South Dakota, and I am equally proud of the people around this table and the partnerships that they have nourished together. These are the people who work every single day to protect the people of this state. We're now going to have a meeting to discuss what more we can be doing. Thank you very much.
That concludes the open press portion. We can come up this door and I'll grab the mics.